Hey y'all, welcome back. My name is Tiara and I'm the owner of Black Teacup. In this week's video, I'm going to be showing you all how I created this crushed diamonds and mint tumbler that I created about a month ago. I learned how to do the taping for the V-split from Jessica Flynn's video, and I will have that link down below. Also, any other products used in the video will be linked down below. It shouldn't be too hard, but if you have any questions, leave it in the comment section and I will be sure to help. Thanks for watching and let's get started. So we're starting out with a 15-ounce skinny that's been sanded and wiped down. Now to achieve the actual V-split, I learned from Jessica Flynn and I will link her video down below. So I'm just going to trace around the bottom of my cup on a piece of paper. I folded it in half and cut it out. And next I'm going to take a lined sheet of paper and put my crease directly on the center of one of the lines. And I'll just tape it in place. And this will just help us line up our ruler in the next step. So here is the ruler that I use. I don't know the technical name for it, but I will have it linked down below. So I'm just going to line the ruler up with the crease line that we created when we folded the circle in half. And then I'm going to take a Sharpie and draw a line from the top of the cup and also at the bottom of the cup. So 2 lines. And then I'm going to go on the other side and do the same thing. Alright, so I have all 4 lines now. It appears to be perfectly even all the way around. Alright, so next I'm going to take some painter's tape. This is 1-inch blue painter's tape. And I'm going to just pull off like a 12-inch strip. It doesn't have to be exact, just long enough to reach from one point to the other. And this part does take a little patience and practice, but the painter's tape is very forgiving. So now we're going to use our tape to connect the lines. So here I'm laying it at the top notch on one side and turning my cup around to meet it to the bottom notch that we drew on the other side. And once you have your tape flat, you can kind of eyeball it and see how wide you have your angle and adjust it if needed. And be patient, work with the tape. You do not want creases because this area is going to be exposed and you want it perfectly lined up. Then I'm going to take another piece of painter's tape and connect going the opposite direction. So you'll overlap the top and then twist your cup around and you should overlap the bottom. Your point should meet exactly where we drew that line. So you'll need to pick up and adjust your tape as many times as needed until that point is directly on the Sharpie line that we drew. There will be a lot of lifting and pulling and lifting and pulling, but just do what you have to do until you get your lines or your tape perfectly straight. And once you have your painter's tape lines down and smooth where you want them, you're going to take your X-Acto knife and cut off the excess pieces where it meets the line that we drew with the Sharpie. So at this point, I noticed that I put my tape too high on this particular point, so I had to start over. So just make sure when you're laying your tape down that you are mindful of where the point is on each side. That way you don't have to go back and redo it like I had to do. So after I corrected that, I went ahead and took my X-Acto knife and trimmed off those edges again. Next, I'm going to take some acetone and a paper towel to clean up those Sharpie lines that we made earlier. In my opinion, I feel like laying the tape is the hardest part of this tumbler. Now that that's out of the way, we'll go ahead and wipe our tumbler down with alcohol and get ready for spray paint. So I will be using Krylon Fusion Satin Beach Glass that I got from Lowe's. The way I did this cup, the top V is going to be solid mint and the bottom V is going to be ombre, the silver glitter going into the mint glitter. So that top V spray paint has to be perfect. You don't want any drips because it will show under the epoxy or any type of imperfections. So it's kind of like doing a black tumbler. Anything can show. Same here. So try to make sure you do your spray paint in short, quick bursts. Let it dry in between coats if you don't have good coverage. That way it doesn't start dripping. Also, I forgot to mention it, you want to make sure that you shake your spray paint really good before spray painting. I try to shake it for at least a minute before I start using it. So I covered the entire top portion of my V with the mint spray paint. And for the bottom V, I'm only going to do half and leave that top stainless steel portion exposed. A silver chunky glitter is going to go over that stainless steel part, and there's no point in base painting it silver, so we're just going to leave that exposed. And here's what your tumbler should look like spray painted. We're going to let that dry before we take it in for glittering. Alright, so here's the glitter I'm using. I am using Mint Chip by Peachy Olive and White Lights Chunky by Lily's Glitter Shop. I will have both linked down below. So now I'm going to glitter the bottom portion of my cup using the epoxy method. Remember, the top portion is going to be solid mint, and the bottom V portion of the cup is going to be chunky silver glitter going into a mint glitter. So when you're applying your epoxy, you want to be careful not to get epoxy in the top V portion. I'm going across the edge of my tape very carefully so that I don't get too much epoxy in places I don't want it to get. This is where the glitter is going to adhere to. Just make sure your epoxy is nice and smooth. Make sure you have good coverage. You're not missing any spots. And it doesn't take a lot, just a little bit. Alright, so now on to glittering. When I glitter my cup, I always have it in my hand, or my hand inside of the cup, and I hold the cup at an angle. So I'm starting with the mint chip. I'm going to go ahead and glitter the bottom of my cup and about a 1-inch rim around the bottom edge of the cup as well. So I'm just going to go all the way around the bottom edge of my cup, making sure I have good coverage before we start moving on to the actual ombre. And I am tapping my glitter. You don't want to lose control of it. So just tap, tap, tap. And here's what I have so far. Next, I'm going to go in with my silver chunky glitter. So initially, my cup is going to be more horizontal to get that corner solid chunky glitter. And then I will angle down and let the glitter fall down into the mint area. So you'll want to add the glitter very lightly. You're not going for 100% full coverage right now. So just lightly tap that glitter on, and this is what it should look like. You see, I still have a lot of areas that aren't glittered. Then finally, I'm going to go back in with my mint chip glitter and fill in the rest of the spots. I'm going to let it fall down into that chunky glitter, and that's going to create a nice ombre effect. So once you have your cup glittered how you want it, you'll tap off the excess, and then you'll go back in with a small sheet of parchment paper to tap the chunky glitter down. You want to make sure that glitter is as flat as possible, because that'll save you from having to do too much sanding after we epoxy it. Now, I don't wait to pull my tape. After I'm done glittering and pressing down my glitter, I pull my tape right away while it's still wet. That way I don't forget, and then it's stuck to the cup. So here's what our cup should look like after we're done with glittering. I'm going to let this cup dry overnight before moving on to sealing the glitter. And you still want to be careful with your cup because that top V portion is still not epoxied and that paint can scratch, so you want to be very careful when handling your cup. I did seal this cup a little differently from what I normally do. So in most of my videos, I seal my glitter with Rust-Oleum clear, matte clear, but for this one I'm going to use epoxy. I'm just taking a very small amount of epoxy and just patting it on top of that glitter. Pretty much like a quick tap, soft rub. I'm not getting the epoxy anywhere else other than that bottom B section. I don't recommend using this method to seal like a full ombre to cup. Since we're having to actually touch the glitter, you might actually move it around, but I'm being very careful to just add it and pat it on top of that glitter so that when I go to apply my next layer of epoxy, my glitter doesn't move. And I'm going all the way around the glittered portion of this cup, so the bottom V portion with the epoxy, just to keep all of that glitter in place. So I let this epoxy cure for about 4 to 6 hours, and then I went in with my next coat of epoxy. Now this time we're going to epoxy the entire cup. The glitter is hard to touch, it's not moving, so I'm going to go on and epoxy the rest of the cup. So I'm going to apply this epoxy just like I would any other cup using a gloved finger. You want to spread the epoxy nice and evenly all the way around the cup. Don't forget your bottom. And you'll go back in with your torch to pop any bubbles. And we will let this cup spin overnight before moving on to the next step. So I'm going to cut this textured silver vinyl by Cricut into strips. This is a permanent premium vinyl. I got it in a variety pack. I think it came with gold as well, but it's a very beautiful vinyl. And I use my Silhouette Cameo to create strips and then cut them out. I'm going to use those strips to line my V. Now, you don't want to do this if your cup is not entirely smooth. So if you needed to add a second layer of epoxy, then that's fine. Do what you need to do. Once your cup is smooth, we'll add the vinyl. So applying the vinyl lines is not too hard. It's not too bad. You're just gonna follow the lines of your design. You can lift the vinyl if needed to reposition it, but yeah, you shouldn't have too much trouble doing this part. I think I cut my vinyl lines at 12 inches, which is way too long, but that's okay. I'd rather have too much than not enough. And once we have the overlap, we'll just take our X-Acto knife and cut off those edges. I overlap my tape at both of the points so it creates an X, and then I'll fill it. You can fill the crease, and that's where you'll run your X-Acto knife to cut off the excess. And it should make a nice, sharp, solid point. Then you'll do the exact same thing with the top V portion. So you should have 4 strips of vinyl. Create the X at the top, cut off the excess. And this is what you should have. So we're going to add a letter K with the crown. And I found this crown on Google. And also the name. I will put the name of the font in the video right in this section because I can't think of it off the top of my head. So I'm going to use some transfer tape to pick up the name Kia, and we're going to put that in the glittered section at the bottom underneath that ombre. Go ahead and press that down once you have it positioned to make sure it's sealed to the cup. And once we have the name in place, we're going to go ahead and put the letter K in the solid mint section. And that's it for decals. Here's what we have so far. Next is epoxy. But before I epoxy, I'll normally let my cup sit overnight in my workroom before applying the epoxy. I did not seal my decals with the matte clear spray paint because I'm not sure how it would affect that textured vinyl. So I just let it sit overnight. I also pressed my vinyl down extra good just to make sure that I had a good seal. After I applied my epoxy, I did not have any lifting or any issues with it. So just make sure you have it nice and adhered. You can also take a heat gun to make sure your decals are in place before applying the epoxy. So I'm going to apply the epoxy like I always do with the gloved finger all the way around the cup. And I'll also use my torch. I'll let this cup spin overnight, before moving on to the next step, which will be sanding. So after my cup is hard to touch and it has been sitting for a day or so, I'll take it outside so that I can expose the rim of the cup. This is something I do with all of my cups, and I use my rotary sander to do it. I talk about this in all of my videos, so you guys probably already know, but I'm just exposing a very thin line of stainless steel across the rim of my cup. This is where the epoxy will seal to versus the very top of the cup. It will allow for a smoother finish in the end. So since I'm using my rotary sander, I'm going to go very slow and steady to make sure I don't scratch up any part that I don't want scratched up. Also, at this point, you could do any additional sanding. Here is my cup. I didn't have to do any other sanding, but you can see the stainless steel at the very top. That's the area I just exposed. After you're done sanding, you'll want to take your cup in, wash it off, and apply your final layer of epoxy. So finally, I'll let my cup cure for the full 2 to 3 days before cleaning it up and milling it out. So I'm going to show you guys how I clean the inside of my cup before I package it up. If you can see, there's epoxy on the inside of the cup, and I'm just going to take my X-Acto knife and very carefully get that out. So you're going to want to go under the epoxy and just kind of scrape all around the rim of that cup until you get that out. But you have to be careful because you can cut the outside of your cup and have to apply another layer of epoxy. I've done it way too many times, so be careful with your X-Acto knife. Once I have all of those hard pieces of epoxy gone and removed, I'll take a paper towel and some acetone and get any overspray that's on the inside of the cup. Once everything is nice and clean on the inside, you can take your cup and wash it out with some Dawn dish soap. I always put my care instructions down in my cup, and I put my lid on top, and that's it. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Here's the final result. I absolutely love the way this cup turns out. I named it on my Etsy shop Crushed Diamonds and Mint Tumbler. Let me know if you guys try it out or if you have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so that you're notified every time we post a new video, which will be on every Wednesday. Also, don't forget to join us over on Facebook at Black Teacup Community. I do behind the scenes, and we also do giveaways there. The link to that group is down below in the comments. Thanks, y'all. Until next time.